Are we talking about the history of the project?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
Oh, but back in those days, it was so blue sky. Sky was the limit.
We had been talking for a while about getting started with new IP, and throwing some ideas around. Okay, what do we want to do? It's a daunting challenge, to be quite honest. It's a little scary as well.
It's terrifying. And thankfully, it's an iterative process. No idea coming right out of the gate is going to be 100% there.
Jeff came in and says, it's got to be open world. We don't have any experience doing open world.
So yes, I did push for the open world, and it was just hubris and naivete. I really enjoyed playing them, and I always felt that there was something missing. What can we do to make it more immersive, make the world feel more responsive to player actions? So the ability to sustain random, interesting encounters that don't just repeat.
One of the things was, okay, we need a hook, we need a character. Early on, we were all fans of Sons of Anarchy, right? So we were like, well, bikers, that hasn't really been done in games. I mean, there's been some mods done for games, and LucasArts did a game like 20 years ago, but there hasn't really been a serious game, I would say, that sort of explores the kinds of things that interested me about Sons, which is not necessarily the violence and the crime, but it's more about the brotherhood. We started to realize that we wanted to be a third-person shooter. That's what Ben's studio has pretty much always done. And, we really wanted to have this sort of constant threat.
Because the world is actually coming for you. That was a line from the very beginning.
Almost every decision we made was based on the principle that it has to be real. You've got to be able to play this game and say, there's no magic, there's no fantasy, there's no dragons. At one point somebody suggested, well, maybe they're demons, and it turns out that this is all metaphor and you're in hell. No, it's like, I wanted the whole thing to be believable and relatable.
John had this crazy idea of meshing Walking Dead sort of zombies with the biker culture. Well, that could be cool. Nobody's ever done that before.
The apocalypse happens, we're an everyman. How dark would we get? How fast would it take us to get there? Those were the early days, just talking about the fantasy of the idea.
Yeah, so between John and Chris and you, who would get the darkest, do you think, in this situation?
Oh, John, every time.
So it really is kind of Sons of Anarchy meets The Walking Dead, so that you've got a very believable set of circumstances, and you play by the rules within that.
How much of those early meetings was it just going on a whiteboard and writing Sons of Anarchy plus Walking Dead equals this thing?
Well, that was definitely part of the early pitch, to kind of sell the idea to outsiders. Inside, we have to actually take that mashup and actually make it mean something that we can act upon. We did that, but we didn't lean on that too hard because it didn't answer all the questions. I mean, we had to go through and forge exactly what that meant.
How many RPG elements should there be? Versus how much survival mode should there be? These are all things that kind of came and went. There are versions of the game going back years that have an emphasis on one element or another. Hey, let's try this, and that doesn't work. Part of it did, so let's keep that and get rid of that and put this in. Does that work? Yeah, that works.
Jeff was always like, we need more enemies on the screen. What can we do? Before you know it, we have the beginnings of what we call lovingly the Horde. And that just sort of started snowballing. Well, what if we do this? What if we do that? And it was just cool to see the team completely light up and embrace it.
It's not just because you're a biker that you're interested in that idea?
I've been riding for a while, but yeah, obviously that was an interest of mine. So I like to do a lot of rides and go to a lot of these bike rallies and that kind of stuff. So being able to add a little bit of authenticity to it is really kind of a cool experience.
This is a game about a guy and his bike, and it's the thing he's got to manage.
So ultimately the game is a love story between a man and his bike?
Your words, not mine.
Okay, all right. Do you love your bike?
I do, it's pretty. I got my bike last year because for years I'm like, no way, I choose life, I don't want to ride a motorcycle. The game, just playing this for so long, there was something where it seeped in, it got to me where I'm like, riding a motorcycle feels like fun.
Our early prototypes were really just on the bike, riding through the world.
It was a motorcycle game, and you could go flat out 60 miles an hour on all the highways. We just realized that in order to make the game more fun and to make it unique to us, we had to break those roads. We had to make it so that the player is spending more time off-road than on. You're on a very narrow trail and everything's whipping by you really fast. And it gives the enemies way more chances to get the jump on you. Just having the world itself be kind of a 3D playground for the bike, I think, was a huge developmental shift, and it really changed the way we thought about the world, the way we thought about developing, all the network of paths and trails and roads.
You've been tinkering in the handheld space for quite a while, and now you have to fill up an entire PS4.
But yeah, we're doing that well.
Is that right?
Yes.
Is it tough to contain even on the PS4 at this point?
Yeah, we're definitely We're definitely pushing the PS4 to its limits.
So the Bend guys, good news is I'm super excited about Bend Studios game, and just a few weeks ago I had a chance to play.
Oh, they're playing it already. So you're saying they're going to announce it and it'll come out right away?
No.
What was the feedback from Sony, or what were the communications with Sony at this phase?
I think at first they're like, you guys are crazy.
Going from a non-open world studio to an open world studio, did they try and warn you about like, hey, this is going to be super hard?
No, honestly, they said, go for it. Let's see what you can do.
You ever fly to Sony's headquarters and say, all right, this is what we want to do with a big pitch, or what is that like?
So first thing to be clear about is we are Sony. So Sony Bend is Sony. So we have a whole team of producers. So they would come down monthly, and Connie was our producer on Siphon Filter 1. It's not like we come up with all the ideas and present it to them. They're constantly working with marketing and with PR and the outsourcing groups to make sure that what we're building is something we can sell. I mean, because that's important, right? But also something that is worthy of first party, because we're part of Sony. So, what we really want to do is create something that is best in class for the kind of game that we're making. That's super important to us.
I'm guessing when this game was bubbling up, Last of Us was coming out.
Sure.
Was there any fear of like, are they going to not be completely on board for another kind of zombie-ish type game? Or what were those discussions like about trying to differentiate yourself?
Those discussions were kind of sidelined and everything. They just really wanted to see. I think they could see from an early start that the direction we were taking was very different than where Last of Us was going.
So everybody was on board with the initial pitch from the very beginning. So in the early days, it was called Dead Don't Riot. I'm sure you guys know that. But from the very, very beginning, it was like, okay, this idea of being on a motorcycle, being in an open world, facing all this extreme danger where the world's coming for you all the time. Everybody was on board with that, both here and our producers.
Is it fun to come up with a name for a new IP?
No, that's a difficult one.
Really? What's it like?
It's a process, right? It was an interesting process, and we actually worked with marketing pretty heavily with this as well, and before coming up with the final title for Days Gone. But yeah,
a couple other working
there
titles.
There were a few others.
Okay, is one of them Dead Don't Ride?
It might have been.
How long have you and John and Jeff been working together?
Since original Siphon days.
Really?
Yeah.
And I was brought in as art director on the very first Siphon Filter. So Chris and I have literally been working together since 1997. And then Jeff Ross, so we brought Jeff in as a mission designer. So he was actually a truck delivery guy working in Portland, but huge gamer. Yeah, the three of us have been together for a long time.
Oh my gosh, and you know them better than you know anybody in the world at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm super high level. I think about, how does what kind of a world do we need to create? How can we make it interesting? How can we make it unique? And Jeff's thinking, well, how can we make it fun? How can we create gameplay that will work in that world? Chris has always been the technical side of the studio. So he's like, well, how can we do this that you guys are talking about?
It's one of the longest running groups in game development at this point.
Pretty cool. And that's what I say. It's like the culture of Bend Studios. It hasn't really changed that much. We can bounce ideas off of each other and say, no, that sucks, or no, that would be awesome, and be able to run with it.
When was the last time John or Jeff surprised you?
Every day.
Oh, really? Okay. In a good way?
Yeah, sometimes.
Do you feel like the studio thinks of themselves as an underdog in the game industry?
I definitely think that way. I think that people don't fully understand who we are and what we've accomplished in the past. They don't expect a game like Days Gone to come from us. There may be questions for, how big is it? How real is the Horde? How, is there more to the game than just the Horde? I think that those are questions that people are still asking because there's something about our studio is not known. I think the toughest days on this project for me as a designer is going to Unreal. We kind of abandoned our previous engine, and the artist had this great leg up. But it takes time to build game systems and AI and weapons. So it just, for years, people would call the game a walking simulator, and that sucked for me. Just because we were working hard building these systems, but the world was so pretty so early on that it was just it was unfair.
It's challenging, yeah. From technical challenges. We've been growing the team. When we first started this project, we were a team of about 50 people.
I heard that you once had a slide where you explain that you could make this game with only 50 people?
Wow, where did you hear that?
I don't know. A little rumor.
Yeah, you know, we're pretty ambitious. I mean, it's kind of the culture of Ben's studio.
You really thought you could make the entire game with 50 people?
You know. You know, at that point, we were just trying to figure out where the scope was and, you know, what the size of the world was going to be. And sure, it seems plausible.
Oh, the one about can we make this game with 50 people?
Yeah.
Yeah, he chastised me for asking that. It's true though. There was a time, and again, it's like when we were working on Siphon Filter, I think it was 13 people, and yeah, that made that PS1 game. And then I think Golden Abyss, we were at about 50, and it's the first open world game we've ever made. So Ben's studio, you know, we had some idea that hey, this sounds like a pretty big game. Maybe 50 people might not be enough. We learned over the next 2 years that yeah, no, it wasn't enough.
It's yet another challenge, and again, that's kind of what Ben Studio is all about. It's like, okay, that's the challenge of the day. That's the challenge of the century. Let's do it.
You know, Ben Studio's culture is something where we definitely do a lot more than people think we could ever do. Going back to Uncharted Golden Abyss, that was a launch title on the Vita, and we were a small studio making an Uncharted game, and it just felt like it was impossible, yet we were there. Everybody wears more than one hat, and it's something where if you take pride in that, this is a great place to work. But you know, if you want to come in and work on one thing forever and do just that for 5 years, it's not a great place for you to work. And some people thrive and some people don't. And so everybody who remains thrives in that type of environment, and that's why we can create such big games with such a small studio. And I think that defines Sony Bend.
And it doesn't fry you out?
Nah, we're scrappy.
Is it tough to get people to move out to Bend?
No, actually, it's not. Bend's an awesome town, so we've got this new building that we're in now, which has been awesome. Really, the vibe is pretty much the same it's always been.
To sort of, again, talk about where Ben Studio is in the Sony family, we have to have super high production values. We want super high production values, and we just weren't willing to settle. We're 130 people now. My guess is by the time you factor in all the third-party support we've gotten and all the support groups, it's going to be north of 250 probably.
There's been some of those kinds of challenges, finding the right people to come on board. Certainly showing at E3 in 2016, that helped a lot because a lot of people finally said, hey, this is what Ben Studio is doing. That looks really cool. I want to make that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Days Gone.
The E3 2016 reveal was amazing.
The whole team, I think, kind of came together at that moment. I was really proud that we showed the world and that I didn't screw up.
We are actually in a really good place right now because the game is fully playable from beginning to end. That's how you make the game fun, is you just play it and play it and play it.
Until people really started playing it in the last year, you know, there was a lot of doubt on the team. I mean, they believed in it, but they were still a little uncertain. But once they started playing it, everybody's coming around to it. I can't wait for the world to see it.
Do you feel like there's misconceptions about the game out there?
I think that we need to show the world more about what the game really is. So there's not misconceptions, just a lack of seeing the whole picture at this point.
You know, I wasn't scared that it wouldn't come together. It's just when it would come together.
So, you know, it just takes one thing. It takes people or it takes time. And that, you know, and Sony's been really, really, really generous with us because, you know, they recognize that Days Gone, to be best in class, is going to take time to get it right.
I'll read reviews.
Okay.
Yeah, like this. You're not gonna.
We'll always keep experimenting, but yeah, Days Gone is definitely on our radar right now. I mean, there's so much we can do. Honestly, it's a tip of the iceberg. There's so many cool things we can do with it.
Can you compare the level of pride you have for this game versus other games you've worked on?
Oh, there's no comparison. So this game will be 6 years by the time we're done. That's a long time. Yeah, it's just been a dream come true, honestly, for me personally. It eclipses everything else I've ever done, and I've got a lot of games I've worked on. But most of those games took a year each, right? So, you know, Siphon Filter took a year, and Siphon Filter 2 took a year, and so on. And I think this has been a journey.
6 times better than Siphon Filter, is that what you're saying?
I have Siphon Filter fans who would disagree with that. But yeah, I would say so.